Hello, TYNE O'Connell here, semi-coherently reading from Pulling Princes, the book I wrote. It's Malory Towers of the moment, set in a boarding school near Windsor Castle. And this is where nearby Eton, where the prince attends. And the narrator is an American teen who, after a number of years boarding at St Augustine's, the Malory Towers of our day, is determined to cease to be the school freak. American freak, as she is less than affectionately known, with all judging by the post-it notes on her back. So this is Dawn Party Heaven, Duvet Hell. For those of you who don't go to boarding school, might give you an idea about what boarding school is all about. And for those of you that do, it may remind you why you don't want to go back after summer break. That evening, during study period, all I could think of was Prince Fred's. I had to stop myself writing his name on my folder. Everyone was so weirdly nice to me that night, and Clementine, Arabella and Honey invited our room to their room for a makeover party. It was normal for one room to be invited to another. But in our other years, Star and I hadn't been included in these invitations and would only go to one another's rooms and hang out, ignoring whoever else was in the room. When Arabella and Honey burst in with their invitation, which clearly included all three of us, Star and I caught each other's eye. I bit my lower lip, terrified that Star would tell them to piss off, but instead she shrugged her shoulders in a, yeah, why not sort of fashion. Georgina called up for a pizza from Pizza Express in Windsor, which you're not really allowed to do, but everyone does, because you can't survive on the inedible grey slops they feed us. Smuggling the Pizza Express guy in isn't that hard, and as long as you tear the box into 1,000 pieces and distribute them carefully into lots of different bins around the school, you don't usually get caught. Later we pulled our tuck in the middle of the floor. Everyone was always really impressed by all the American sweets that I brought back. Jay had taken me to this really cool candy shop in the Beverly Hills Mall, and I just bought everything that looked different to what they have here in the UK. Georgina said, "Wow, Calypso darling, these Hershey's Kisses are so delicious." They are. "I like the pixie sticks," Star added as she tipped one up and sucked the sugar out of the tube, and I must say I still like a pixie stick or two. I was thinking about saying that Jay had bought them for me, which was kind of true, but for some reason I didn't want to talk about Jay anymore, my fake boyfriend. Maybe I was afraid of jinxing the mileage I'd already got out of my fake boyfriend, or maybe it was because I couldn't stop thinking about Fred's and how fit he looked in all his fencing gear. I especially liked the way he had his hair, all sort of longish on top, but not floppy like some of the Eads nerds. It was all bunched up like it was gelled, only it wasn't, because, well, gel is so tragic, and I wouldn't be able to fancy a boy that wore gel. His hair was just thick and cut in a really cool, natural way. We gave one another homemade facials using porridge and bananas and honey and other goopy stuff we nicked from the kitchen. Georgina even offered to wax my legs. Star rolled her eyes, but I couldn't have been more thrilled. Even though the pain was almost too horrendous to describe, I kept my grin fixed on my face. Star let Clemmy rag her hair so she could have ringlets, and then braided Clemmy's hair, which looked really cool. "You look stunning," Arabella told Clemmy. And she did. Her long, dark grey, dark hair braided down her back seemed to bring out her gypsy looks. I felt proud of Star because it was her idea. Star and Clemmy's family estates were near to each other, so despite their differences, Clemmy often blagged a lift home with Star on exits. Looking around the room now, I realised why Star had never really felt like an outsider in the same way I did, because she'd grown up in this world. She'd gone to prep school with these girls. They spoke the same, and ultimately they spoke the same language. For her, there was no inside or outside. It was a case of choose to refuse. But for me, that night was like being in an entirely new country, an entirely new school. Later, we snuck down to the science lab to steal some of the condoms they used for sex education lessons so we could practice putting them over bananas the way they'd taught us. Ms. Argos had come in from a local comp school as a concession to the curriculum. Comp schools are Americans' public schools. It's very confusing, I know, but public schools are boarding schools. Well, they're the old schools of the UK, but fee-paying schools. And the reason they're called public schools is because you can go to them if you have the money wherever you live. Whether you live in London, if you live in London, you can go to a school in Cornwall. Whereas if you go to a comp school here, public school in the US, you are confined to your local comprehensive school. You cannot travel to a better school. You have to stay in your area. So anyway, Ms. Argos had come from the local comp to teach us sex ed, because, well, it wouldn't really do to have a nun rolling a condom over a banana, would it? Although it would be quite funny. I suppose a non-nun teacher could have done it, but then the really, really Catholic parents would have thrown hissy fits. Maybe it was just a government thing. I'd hardly ever been invited to someone else's dorm party, and I definitely never had someone as cool as Georgina offer to wax my legs. This was the longest that anyone apart from Star had gone without mocking me in the way I spoke. Star kept rolling her eyes at me as if to say, "What are we doing with these freaks anyway, Calypso?" But I just pretended not to notice. "I can't wait to do this to Fred's," Honey announced as she was rolling a condom over a banana. "Are you serious?" I asked before I could stop myself. Firstly, I was horrified at the thought of her with Fred's, and secondly, I hadn't realised that anyone had actually gone that far yet in our year, apart from Lucy, who was one of the druggy girls that Georgina et al. Didn't talk to. There was a rumour going around that Lucy had even slept with one of the plebs in the village, which was considered as tragic as it could get at St Augustine's. But obviously not as tragic as being unable to pull anyone. "Oh yeah," Honey went on. "Freddie was totally into me, darlings, as I'm sure you all noticed. He asked me to all this really personal stuff about our holiday in Kenya last year, like we only know about everyone in common. I could tell he wanted to invite me out, but no one would leave him alone. It was like that time we went to that club in the limo and everyone kept asking me if I was a model. Remember, Georgina?" That was Honey. We all know Honey. We all love to hate a Honey. "Darling, your hair was out of this world amazing that night that we ragged it," Georgina said, applying eyelash dye to Clemmie's eyes. "It would be so cool to pull Prince Frederick, darling," Clemmie sighed wistfully as a drop of art dye rolled down her cheek. "But would you, actually do it with him?" Star asked, speaking directly to Honey for the first time that night, or maybe even ever. All the girls looked at Star as if she was from year 7 or something. "Hello, we're talking Prince Frederick, second in line to the throne," Honey reminded her, rolling her eyes in disbelief. "So if he asked, you'd actually, do the business?" "Darling, that's quite a big step," Arabella added, and then she giggled as the banana burst through the condom. "Darling, I heard Lucy's already given a boy a blowjob," Clemmie added. "She's such a slut, though. She'd give one to Mr. Morton if he asked," Georgina remarked. Mr. Morton was the octogenarian groundsman. "Are you going to pull him at the social then, Honey?" Georgina nudged Honey's leg with her toe, "or at the Feathers Ball?" "I don't see that I have much choice," she sighed, as if kissing Prince Freddie would be such an effort. "I thought he fancied Calypso, actually," Star interjected, giving me a supportive smile. I went bright red. If I were caught fancying a boy that Honey planned to pull, it could destroy me. Please, as if, Honey sneered, flicking her perfect blonde tresses over her shoulder. Can you honestly envision a member of the royal family with an American? Then she started laughing in that really nasty way, and everyone apart from Star joined her. Star looked over at me and pulled out her lip gloss. I pulled mine out too in a show of solidarity and applied liberally. Wear your lip gloss as your pain. Well, what about Mrs. Simpson, that woman King Edward married? Star reminded them all. My point exactly, said Honey. Wait, were they comparing me to that prune-faced old hag? I'm not being horrible, Honey said. Calypso, you know that. I'm just, well, you know how it is. Did I? I shrugged. Maybe she was right, though. Princes probably were really restricted in who they're allowed to fancy. I seem to remember that they totally loathe Catholics. I thought of reminding Honey of this, but decided against it. Besides, you've got Jay, haven't you, darling? Georgina reminded me, offering Tobias Tobias is her teddy bear, a Hershey's kiss. I'd temporarily forgotten about my tragic fake relationship with gay Jay. Yeah, totally, I agreed. Has he called you or anything yet, darling? She asked kindly, popping the chocolate into her own mouth. Tobias wasn't feeling very hungry. I actually haven't checked my phone messages, She smiled at me and passed me some of her coconut and passion fruit cream to put on my legs. This smells just so divine, darling. Try it. I looked at my legs. They were still all red and blotchy from the waxing. I know a girl who spent all night in a sleeping bag with Fred's cousin Alfred, Arabella remembered. I rubbed the cream into my legs and wondered what it would be like to share a sleeping bag with Fred's. I wouldn't even mind if he was sweaty. When we got back to, well, I know it's disgusting, isn't it? The things that we put up for boys, we fancy. When we got back to our room, it was clear that Misty had been there. The stench was horrific. That was our house mother's stinky, a dog who used to come and urinate in all our dorm rooms, but our house mother was determined, we imagined it, and that Misty would never do such a thing. Bugger Misty, I cursed just as Miss Cribb walked in to say it was time for lights out. Language, Calypso, she trilled. Miss Cribb, it's not fair. My duvet's all wet. Misty's weed on it. She put her hand on my soggy duvet to feel if it was wet. Don't be silly. You don't know for certain if it was Misty. Hello? It smelled of dog wee, and Misty was the only dog living in Cleethorpes, our building. Now you stop fussing. Give it to me and I'll wash it. It's a warm night and you can sleep with a sheet just for tonight. Star waded to my rescue. Miss Cribb, this is so unfair. Poor Calypso will freeze, and anyway it was Misty. You know it was. That's enough cheek from you, young lady. Apologise to Mitzi immediately. I will not, Star shouted. She can be very stubborn. Misty's always weeing all over the dorm. It's disgusting. Star, I'm warning you. That's enough, Miss Cribb replied with a wobble in her voice. Misty's a lovely dog. She adores you girls. Why, you're her family. She'd be devastated if she heard what you were saying. It's okay, Miss Cribb. I don't mind sleeping under a sheet, I assured her. I hated it when Miss Cribb cried. It meant someone had to cuddle her, and she'd completely soak you in her tears, and her beard had scratched her face. I gave her the duvet, and she grabbed me for a beardy kiss on the cheek. You don't really think Misty did this dreadful thing, do you, dear? It was probably a dog from the village. Yes, that would be right. A dog had walked 2 miles from the village, managed to get through the electrified barbed wire fencing, negotiated its way past hordes of roaming attack dogs and armed security guards and nuns, found its way inside our locked building just in order to pee on the faded faces of my duvet with the faces of Club N. Yes, you're probably right, I comforted her, patting her back, hoping to escape from her bosomy embrace sooner rather than later. She smelled a bit like dog wee herself. Now Miss Cribb will bring you a nice clean sheet and tuck you in, dearie. She often referred to herself in the third person as if she were royalty or something. I wondered if Freddie referred to himself in the third person.